Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we are going to talk about Jungle Raj in Bihar. This is the term given to the RJD rule when they ruled over 25 years in Bihar from 1990 to 2005. But why still this word Jungle Raj continues to haunt Bihar even in 2025? That we'll try to understand in our today's video. Okay, now the notes that I will be using in this session, if you want to download them, they will be made available on a particular Telegram channel called as ETS Live. So you can go to this channel and continue to download the notes. And when you subscribe to the channel, you'll also get updated about future videos and their notes in the same channel, right? So please do not forget to subscribe to it. Let us start by our today's discussion by understanding the context. Why are we discussing about Jungle Raj in 2025? Now the term Jungle Raj, it continues to highlight the rule done by Rashtriya Janata Dal when they were in power in Bihar from the time of 1990 to 2005. And this continues to highlight the dominance of Lalu Yadav in the politics of Bihar. But why are politicians using this term in 2025? You'll soon understand. Now, this term, Jungle Raj, has been invocated multiple times even during the current year's election when it is going to happen in Bihar few days from now. So much so that politicians like PM Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah, they have used this word repeatedly to make people aware of the kind of misrule or lawlessness that existed in Bihar 20 years before. And why are they using this word multiple times? Because if you can understand, there has been more than 20 years since the time RJD was in power. But when there are newer voters that are going to vote for the first time in Bihar, these voters must be around 18 to 20 years of age. So theoretically, these people have never lived under what is called as Jungle Raj. So what politicians want to do, they want to use this term Jungle Raj as a political memory device so as to make people aware of the kind of misrule and the lawlessness that existed in Bihar back in the early decades of 2000s or the last few decades of the 20th century. And therefore, it wants to make people aware that if you vote RJD back to power, you will continue to remain under Jungle Raj until the time they are in power. So this is the political rationale why parties are invocating this term even in 2025. But where does this term originate? What is the consequence that this term led to Bihar? That is what we are trying to understand in our today's session. Now you must have realized that this is a very political word, Jungle Raj. So was this word for the first time coined by politicians? The answer is no. This word rather for the first time was used in 1997, not by a political body, but by Patna High Court. Patna High Court was dealing with petitions which created or which was related to waterlogging incidences in Patna, and therefore court made an observation. They said that this situation that existed back in Patna due to waterlogging was worse than Jungle Raj. So opposition parties at that time like JDU, BJP, they used this word multiple times and made this term synchronous with the chaos and anarchy that existed at that time when Bihar was under RJD rule. So this is the first time. The origin of this term was by judiciary, but later on this continues to be used by political parties to invoke the sentiment of anarchy and lawlessness that existed in Bihar at the time RJD was in power. Now, when RJD came into power in Bihar, it led to churning of politics not just in the state of Bihar but in the entire North Belt. And this was due to the factor of mandalization. Now, mandalization is the term used by political scientists to highlight the dominance of other backward classes in the Indian politics. So this showed you that rise of OBC-centric politics, and what factor led to rise of OBC-related politics was because of invocation, formation and recommendation of Mandal Commission. Now, due to invocation and recommendation of Mandal Commission, we realized the power scales in Indian politics tilted away from upper class, who were also dominant in Bihar at that time, towards the OBC sections that were sections like Yadavs and Kurmis. So power shifted not just in UP but also in Bihar, where power shifted from upper caste to backward classes of citizens. And this, by the way, shows empowerment of different sections of society, particularly marginalized sections, other backward classes, most economically backward classes, as well as Dalits of politics. But other factors also added to the prestige and power that RJD secured at that time. Another factor was factor of secularization. One of the big political developments that happened in late 1980s and early 1990s was Rath Yatra done by BJP leader LK Advani. So when Lalu tried to stop the Rath Yatra from entering into Bihar, it made Lalu Yadav the champion of secular caste and particularly the Muslim sections of society. So in addition of securing Yadav vote bank, by having secular credentials, Lalu Yadav was also able to consolidate the Muslim vote bank, and that is why the MY factor emerged as a solid vote bank of RJD. So this allowed RJD to consolidate its power. But as a result of this political consolidation, we saw a negative impact on Bihar politics that is called as Yadavization of Bihar politics, which started from late 1990s and continued up till 2005. Now, this showed you that Yadavs mostly became dominant in Bihar politics in order to secure resources of the state, in order to access and having a greater say of things. Now, as a consequence of Yadavization of politics, it led to alienation of other backward classes, which eventually became the vote bank and factor responsible of bringing Nitish to power in 2005. So, this is basically the entire summary of Bihar politics, where or how Lalu Yadav got power and what are the factors that led to end of RJD rule in 2005. But we are discussing Jungle Raj. So what factors told us that there existed a kind of lawlessness and anarchy in the state called as Jungle Raj? Let us understand those factors. First factor is existence of crime and absence of law and order. And this can be interpreted by multiple instances. Now, kidnapping, which was act of kidnapping someone in order to secure ransom, this kind of instances increased in Bihar. For example, from the time Rabdi Devi was in power from 2001 to 2004, Bihar witnesses registered, not total, registered cases of more than 1500 instances of kidnapping. Now, when Nitish came to power, this did not mean kidnapping stopped altogether. It continued, but in smaller numbers. So, this sharp decline showed that due to change of power from RJD to JDU, the instances of kidnapping declined. So, this meant that kidnapping was one of the biggest factors that contributed to this law and order and chaos termed as Jungle Raj. Similarly, there was this very famous kidnapping that was related to a Patna-going schoolboy known as Kisle. So much so that this gathered the attention of national politics. Former Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee, in one of his political rallies in Patna, said, "Mera Kislo lota do." So this highlighted that this issue was not just remained regional or a state-centric issue. This became a national issue. When invocated by a famous politician, this showed you the kind of lawlessness that existed in Bihar. Similarly, caste-based massacres was one of the negative features associated with Jungle Raj. So much so that between 1997 to 2001, 737 people were killed, as much as 58 massacres happened. And if you narrow down this time frame from 1994 to 2000, more than 330 people were killed. And this is the time period where peak caste violence happened. Now, infamous cases include in Gaya, in Bhojpur, in Lakshmanpur, in Sankarbegha, in Senari. All of these witnesses or this kind of caste-based massacres reflected deep caste fault lines and erosion of state coercive capacity. Now, for state to dominate law and order, as state government is responsible for maintaining law and order in the particular state, and if this law and order fails to be maintained by the state government, this relates to chaos. And so much so that the caste fault lines was a factor of caste-based massacres, where violence happened against different sections of society. As far as upper caste were concerned, massacres involved sections of landlords who are called as Bhumihars in Bihar. Similarly, even Rajputs were massacred in large number. But this does not mean that this caste-based violence was only relating to people of upper caste. It also included people coming from marginalized sections of society. For example, violence also happened against members of scheduled castes, against Muslims, and even against the leftist people who subscribe to leftist ideology. So this exhausted deep caste-based fault lines where violence happened against upper caste of the society and also against the marginalized section of the society. So this was second factor which added to the chaos and lawlessness, also called as Jungle Raj. Now, administration decay also played a very important role. First of all, bureaucrats and police officers who were honest and upright, they found it difficult to do their day-to-day jobs. So, for political reasons, they sought transfer away from Bihar. And the time of 2000, where Bihar was bifurcated into two different states, that is Bihar and Jharkhand, many officers sought transfer to Jharkhand. The officers who couldn't go to Jharkhand, they sought central deputation at that time. And this was an instance where bureaucracy was even demoralized in the state. Now, officers who weren't honest and upright, they rather chose to prove their lineage to the political party, that was RJD, and that is why it led to casteization and politicization of bureaucracy in the state of Bihar. And this was the third factor which added to the jungle raj in the state. Now, what is the impact of this jungle raj on Bihar's growth and development? How has this affected polity, economy and society of Bihar? Let us understand this. Now, during the time RJD was in power, state institutions, they were systematically weakened, be it institutions responsible for law and order, administration or implementation of this policy. So as a result, we saw policy implementation suffered, there was rise in corruption, and the state for a larger period was unable to attract private and capital investment. Now, development schemes, as you can understand, is passed by government, but when it comes to their implementation, it is the administration of bureaucracy which is responsible for it. But rather than development, the focus of developmental scheme becomes extension of patronage to people who were close to the political ruling. So this increased the instances of corruption in the state, where people or contractors who were politically connected got the contracts, and this resulted into poor execution of this scheme, right? So this was the first reason why erosion of governance has created a sense of underdevelopment in the state of Bihar. Another factor is collapse of investor confidence, which led to economic stagnation. Now, one of the most crucial aspects of bringing capital investments into a state is existence or a sense of law and order. Why do you think Western states or why do you think Southern states in India are so economically developed as compared to Northern and Eastern states? The reason is existence of law and order. For example, if you're a working woman traveling somewhere in southern part of our country or even in western part of our country, you are relatively safe. Even you're returning from office late in the night, you're assured that my personal belongingness, be it jewelry, be it laptops, will be safe from the thieves, right? But this is not the same in case of Bihar. So when frequent kidnappings happen for a ransom, when highway robberies happen, when extortions happen, it creates a fear economy. And in this fear economy, professionals, industrialists, they are afraid of making newer investments in the state. And this exactly happened in Bihar. During 1990s and early 2000s, India was growing at an average rate of 6.5 to 7% annually. And compared to that, with the growth of Bihar, which was just 2 to 3%. I'm talking about time period from 1990s to 2000s. If you take a smaller time frame from 1990s to starting of 2000, this meant that Bihar grew negatively. So this showed you that in absence of investor confidence, Bihar was pushed into the vicious cycle of low investment and low economic growth. So much so that even the per capita income of Bihar was half of that of country, and sometimes even it was 1/3 of that of national average. So this highlighted the lack of economic development. Now, what happens when you are unable to provide economic development? The kind of job opportunities do not exist. And as Bihar is a very populationally dense state, in absence of lack of opportunities or in absence of law and order, people sought refuge in other states. And this led to mass out migration out of Bihar. As migrants or amount of migration out of the state of Bihar increased by 2 times, and skilled workers, teachers, professionals left Bihar to seek avenues in other states. And even today, the large section of Bihar's economy is not driven by domestic growth or not driven by Bihar-led growth. It is driven by remittances that are provided by people working in other parts of the country or in other parts of the globe. There is a reason why people from Bihar constitute a large section of labor who are working in Middle East. Why? There is no job opportunities in Bihar for them. So this shows you the negative impact it has had on Bihar's growth and development. Now let us talk about social impact. One of the features that became and which continues to be so in Bihar politics is the rise of criminals in Bihar. So much so that you must have heard of the term Bahubalis, right? The term Bahubalis, which basically signifies the criminals who have entered into politics. And why has criminal entered into politics, so that this means, or this acts as a means of protection for them from any law and order, uh, or any action of law and order on them. Now, in Bihar, which is already underdeveloped, you must have expected that the politicians now must focus on development. They must focus now on providing education, providing healthcare services, providing better infrastructure, so that human capital develops in Bihar. But this is not the case. Even today, Bihar continues to be overshadowed by identity-based appeasement. While mandalization of politics ended the dominance of upper caste, but instead of strengthening the entire monolith of OBC, what Jungle Raj did was it led to Yadavization of politics in Bihar. So let me show it to you with the help of simple flowchart. Now, mandalization of politics meant that the upper caste sections of society, which were earlier dominating the politics, they gave way to OBCs and Dalits. So originally, mandalization meant that the OBCs and the marginalized section of the society got more bargaining power. They got more access to resources, right? So this was the original intention of mandalization of politics, or what was the recommendations given by the Mandal Commission, right? But instead of this happening, which must have led to social and political upliftment of the marginalized, what happened in mandalization of politics is that instead of one section dominate, or instead of the whole community dominating the politics, it led to the dominance of Yadavization. So instead of mandalization, which wanted the entire monolith of OBCs and Dalits, that were the marginalized section at that time, to dominate the politics, instead of this whole monolith dominating the politics, instead what happened is that inside the OBCs, the Yadavs became supreme, whereas the EBCs, or extreme backward classes, and Dalits, they became more marginalized. So what happened? That bargaining power and access to resources was provided only to one subset of OBCs, that were Yadavs. And this is what Yadavization of politics is all about. Whereas the marginalization or fragmentation of society happened, and marginalization ensured that society in Bihar continues to remain fragmented. So this, what I told you on the left hand side, was the feature of mandalization of politics. So this was the feature of mandalization of politics, which originally in theory wanted to provide social and political upliftment to the marginalized section of the society. Rather, what happened in Jungle Raj, that upliftment and social upheaval happened, but only for a community, that was Yadav, whereas on the other hand, the other marginalized sections, that is extreme backward classes of citizens or Dalits, they became more marginalized, they became more fragmented. So this is what was the feature of Jungle Raj instead of what should have happened due to mandalization of politics. And that is why I said resource allocation became caste driven. Resources were provided majorly to the Yadav section, right? Now, what is the long-term consequences on the Bihar growth and development? That development gap happens or exists between Bihar and rest of the country. Talk about the state which bifurcated from Bihar, Jharkhand. Yes, it has not grown with the levels you'd expect other states to grow, which is so resource intensive. But still, Jharkhand has gotten a higher economic growth, has gotten a higher social and economic development as compared to Bihar. And the state of Bihar became synchronous with poverty and development. And this reinforces the vicious cycle of low investment and low growth. For example, to achieve higher economic growth, what you require is higher economic investment. And this process, which reinforces each other, is called as virtuous cycle. But instead of this happening in Bihar, what has happened is that low economic growth has discouraged any future investments from happening. And this is a self-reinforcing negative cycle, and that is why this cycle is called as vicious cycle of underdevelopment and low economic growth. So this is what is happening in Bihar, and this legacy even continues to today, that newer investments or newer businesses, they are afraid of making future investments in Bihar. What if the government changes? What if the Jungle Raj comes back, right? So this shows you legacy of institutional decline continues to affect capacity building, continues to drive the negative perception that the state has become notorious for, and therefore investors, administrators, they still associate Bihar with Jungle Raj, making recovery psychologically and reputationally much more difficult. So this is why this problem continues to haunt Bihar even today, and why it is relevant in these days politics. Let us discuss that. Now, in defense, when other parties highlight Jungle Raj of Bihar, RJD has stated that this is just a political smear campaign to erase the justice or erase the legacy of social justice, according to RJD, which was the feature of Lalu's rule. Now, they highlight that railway was turnaround when Lalu was the Union Minister of Railways. This might be disputed. Similarly, Tejasvi Yadav for a brief period of time was Deputy CM under the CM-ship of Nitish Kumar. So they highlighted we created 5 lakh new jobs. So one of the reasons that RJD highlights that when NDA itself was failing to perform, they have reinvocated the issue of Jungle Raj to distract voters away from the development which happened during the RJD rule. But we know how much social upheaval or social justice it actually led to. Now, what is the broader political insight or analytical insight we get from this discussion? First of all, you need to understand this term Jungle Raj is a political symbol which many political parties wants to seek the imagination of people who did not existed back then, and this particularly are the newer section of voters who have arrived in the political lexicon. Now this invocation of Jungle Raj acts as a weapon which is used by NDA against the RJD, that if you vote for RJD, Jungle Raj would be back in Bihar. And sometimes RJD uses this Jungle Raj as a shield. They use this as a symbol of shield, highlighting that when we ensured social justice, this led to violence against the upper caste of the society. And it is not the fact, according to RJD, they did not create development. They created a political upheaval which led to emergence of OBCs in the politics of Bihar. Now, this discussion for our point of view highlights 2 different issues. Whether the voting should be given in name of social justice, on the name of caste, or whether development and governance should be the priority for Bihar. Now, I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for, because India, we all have a right to vote. Even the constitution provided, even the various laws like Representation of People Act provided. So it is your own judgment, it is your own thinking that should lead you whether you vote for one political party or another, because right to vote is essentially a right given to all the citizens who are over and above 18 years of age. So this is from which I leave you. What do you think about this issue? Did I analyze it properly, or was I lacking something behind? Please do let me know in the comment section what do you feel about it. Please be very civil about it. We all want development for Bihar. Although I'm taking this session from Haryana, but I originally hail from Bihar. So even this concerns me as well. And this should concern each and every person in the country, not just from Bihar. Please do let me know in the comments. And before solving the practice question, which is essentially the PYQs of UPSC, I'd want all of you to pay close attention to what I'm going to say. Sorry, students who are looking to give exams in 2027 and 2028, there is one good news. We have decided to extend the admission period for October batch. This extends up till 5th of November. So please be very quick. Take the admission now. And do not forget to use the code ATS Live, because this code helps you fetch maximum discounts on not just this, but also on 2028 courses. Okay. Now, before ending this today's session, let me see how many of you are able to answer this question. This question appeared in 2017. Right to vote and right to be elected in India is which kind of a right? Do let me know the correct answer in the comment section. And if you want to download the notes, they will be made available on this particular Telegram channel. If you have problems in finding the channel, you can always scan this QR code. So with this, I take your permission. Please have a very good day.